Joyce Mang has an amazing YouTube channel called Joyce Mang, but she has a series called Type Talks where she does these great panel interviews with all different types. So, for example, she'll have on like five ESTPs and she'll ask them questions in sort of a long format. It's really lively, and you learn a lot about each of the types, how they interact, how there's a spectrum of type, which is one of the things I really like, and what I'm kind of on that path as well, is trying to show that just because you're a certain type does not mean that there isn't a wide spectrum of what you could be. So this was a great, very fun, insightful interview between me and Joyce. So enjoy the interview. So Joyce, your channel is known for its long form panel discussions which with each of the types, and you call it type talks, which is interesting. For example, like recently I saw a couple weeks back, you had like five ESTPs on the channel. I think recently did a five ENTJs. You talk about various topics, you ask them questions, and it's like a kind of a fun loving format. First, I want to say you have incredible patience because some of yours go really, really long. And I think that might be indicative of your type being an INFJ, but I don't want to get sidetracked here. How did you discover that was the best way to run your show? And kind of what is your goal with having the panel discussions?
Yeah, I thought it added more humanity to the type space. It's kind of like humans of New York, but with typology. So
Okay.
you get to hear in their own words, their own experiences as their type. And it gives a different dimension to type because when you can hear stories attached to type, it gives it more life rather than just reading a description.
That's good. And it kind of, it shows there is a spectrum of type.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I find that when I make them like 3 hours long, it'll allow people to open up more. I know they're really long, but sometimes it can cause people to start to warm up after the 1 hour mark of who they actually are. So it takes a while. And so my patience is really, it really adds to, this because it allows
Okay.
people to be themselves. Yeah.
Okay. On every channel that I like subscribe to, I always like to sort by, what's the most popular video on the channel. And when I go through yours, like three out of the first four are all related to the INTJ. And which is just funny because I feel like even on my channel, that's like my most watched video. So let me ask you, are we, because I'm an INTJ, just narcissists, or is there something less sinister going on there?
I feel like with INTJs, people are fascinated of this type. They're known as the mastermind. They have
Mm.
as much mystery as the INFJ type has. It's something the community built up, I guess. Yeah, I realize people really like their INTJs. Maybe it's all ENFPs who are Googling their soulmate and they're like, oh yeah, INTJs. So maybe there's a big ENFP population in the MBTI community and that causes a surge in the INTJ material.
Oh yeah, like okay, if they're soulmate or they're dating one and they're like, why are they this way?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That is so
Mhm.
funny. So let me ask you this. As someone, you've been in the typology community for a while. You've talked to a lot of personalities. I think you've kind of studied, and you are kind of doing a like insidious study on it on type in YouTube. What is the status of the MBTI community right now?
Yeah, so the status of the MBTI community right now is there are a lot of new theories emerging, and people are trying to give new hypotheses. So it's basically there are more takes on MBTI now. Like if MBTI was The Sims, there would be many expansion packs. Sims, cat and dog, zombie mod. Yeah, now there's just more and more typology systems, and I'm thinking perhaps it's possible to link them all together and to have them all in one place in a way that they all can make sense rather than a million fragmented systems. Yeah.
That is, yeah. And so I feel like the one that I keep hearing about, and I know it's not like new, but it's something new to me, is like the idea of objective personality. And that's an
Mhm.
offshoot. And then I don't know if spiral dynamics is part of this as well at all. But are are you trying to, in your own way, find something that merges them all together, or do you just wish they were all merged together?
I want to, over like the course of these 10 years, I'm planning to get my PhD, and then I'll
Nice.
figure out how to like standardize a personality test through that. And then I want to explain why these tests have so many similarities, what they're really pointing at that is generally the same, and how you can reconcile this so in a neat way.
I want to ask you this question because I feel like this is going to be my staple question. It's the most fun question when it comes to people that are in the type community. And I asked Frank James this the other day. He's an INFJ. And I want to know if you were assembling a team for a project or activity, any sort of endeavor. I'm not going to preface it by giving you like it's this specific thing, but what 4 MBTI types would you choose?
Yeah, so the 4 MBTI types I would choose is probably the ESFP, the ENFP. I'm just throwing types. I'll let you know my rationale after.
Okay.
The ENTJ and the ENFJ. And my
Bold.
reasoning, yeah, and my
So can
reason,
you go through each one and explain?
yeah. So I like the ENFJ because they're like my favorite type to befriend. So they'd probably give me a lot of motivation, morale. They'd kind of want to lift my mood when things get tough. They'd be like the caretaker of everyone's needs. So the ENFJ would take care of that, and I'd have a best friend on the team. So bang that. And
Okay.
then there would be the ENTJ. Like he would be the one who would get all the things moving, all the tasks, like always trying to meet those objectives when we're dilly-dallying too much. So they'll keep us on track. They're making sure we get things done and that we don't procrastinate. So we need someone like that on the team.
Yep.
Yeah. And then we have the ENFP, the ideas person. So if we run out of ideas, the ENFP will always give us more ideas, and they'll take care of all the brainstorming, and they'll go like, hey, have you thought of this? So they're basically an endless wall of ideas.
Yeah.
So then all the NE is covered. And then the ESFP, because they will notice everything in our surroundings, and they're basically, because they're sensing DOMs, there's a slight realistic slant they have, so they're going to like maybe tell us if the things we're saying aren't grounded in reality, and so they'll keep us in the world, and they'll also have a lot of fun while doing it, so they would also make the work environment a fun place, bring out the performer side when we're getting too dry and stale. And we always just need a little sprinkle of ESFP.
Yeah, that's true. Now, did you formulate this? I know that like the ENFJ, you said it's a friend and it's a good, a perfect balance to your being an INFJ. Did you think about it in terms of just I need these dominant traits, or were you not considering that? Because you said NE, so then you have NI, and then ENFJ has FE. Were you thinking about it like that or not?
Yeah, I was thinking about the extroverted dominant functions on a project task team. I'd want extroverts to kind of move it forward. They'd take care of the extroversion while I could be the sole point of introspection. I'm kidding.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's really funny. Like I am now creating a spreadsheet where I'm putting what each type says would be their top 4 and just kind of collecting data. I have no idea what I'm going to do with it, but it's just interesting to see. So like, for example, like I chose ENTJ, ENTP, ISTJ, and ESFP or ISFP.
Yeah.
I think when you're learning about type and you get into the cognitive functions and then you start to learn like, I want that function as a dominant on my team. I think that actually makes things easier just in life. What would you say to that statement?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It seems like your team is a very business team. It's a lot of thinkers in one team. Yeah, yeah. Whereas I want to have a little bit of a personal human aspect to my teams.
No, not okay. I really admire the NE type as a great counterbalance to R type. The idea of brainstorm, like just just to kind of almost troll you a little bit to make sure you're solid on your ideas when you're developing something. Like, are you sure? Because even if they don't believe it, they just want to see if like how strong your convictions are, even if they're like
Yeah.
not actually set in their idea. So I love that part of it. Now, being an INFJ, do you have any advice as INFJs kind of navigate the world?
Yeah, I guess I would say to really find people who understand where you're coming from and your language. There's this Twitter quote that says, find people who speak your language so you don't have to spend your lifetime translating your soul. And it's
Mm.
true. Find people who understand you so you don't have to feel like like you have to translate everything you're saying into their language, where you can just speak freely. It prevents a lot of fatigue. So INFJs or anyone, if you're feeling fatigued or tired, consider that it's because you're not allowed to use your dominant functions, that you're not allowed to use the things that come most naturally. So you're naturally going to be tired or depressed or have a little bit of dysthymia because you're just out of your flow state for too long. Yeah, so INFJs, if you're feeling some sort of emotional symptoms, it can very much be from a spiritual symptom of you kind of going against your type. And that will have rippled consequences on your health. Yeah.
Yeah, it will. Like I know that INFJs tend to have a higher rate of like gastrointestinal problems from like stress or internal stress. And it's like that's interesting that type and like certain diseases or like hypertension or like certain types have like the lowest level of heart disease or like whatever stress.
Mm-hmm.
So you think that INFJs might be sitting in their like inferior function too often? That's causing them to have these eruptions of emotions and or depression?
Yeah, or even like a suppression of their easiest functions to use. It's almost like numbing out the things that are most true to you, and eventually your body will fight back. Like you will get that boomerang effect where your body will get these gastrointestinal
Yeah.
issues to tell you that something's wrong, and that it's telling you to listen to you and to really make sure that you're not living a life that's a lie.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Or
absolutely.
it could run genetically in your family, either way.
Yes, and that's a good point. And I do feel like that might be an excuse. Or like we're looking for the wrong thing. Like I think the two things people don't look at is type and their diet. They're just like, it can't be those things. So it's probably something else. Like, no, those are probably the two main things, but type is a one that people aren't even aware of. And this is probably the last thing I'll ask you just because, and we've talked about it offline, but I really want my audience to hear what you have to say on it. So like there are those that say type personality type or assessments or tests. How dare they call them tests, say that those are bogus or not scientifically validated. How do someone that's really believes in it respond to someone like that?
There is a big database of the scientific journals surrounding type, and it's called the CAPT.
Mm-hmm.
So there's decades worth of research on the Myers-Briggs. And second, for it to be a standardized psychometric tool, it has to pass like multiple rigorous steps, and it has to meet the standard of a psychometric test. And the Myers-Briggs assessment tool does actually meet that standard. So if you're going to say that it's bogus, you might as well say the other psychometric tests that you can take are also bogus because they're on the same level. I think the reason why people like to push back against personality type is because they find it deterministic, which is not
Right.
true. They
Right.
don't like to be put in a box. They don't like to be simplified. So it's their way of pushing back. But it's not a good argument because the type's not putting you in a box.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of giving you a thematic outline of who you are and your little idiosyncrasies.
Yeah,
My
whatever. I
English.
get what you're saying.
Yeah, those little things that make you you, the unique things, fill that in. So there's no boxing in that this theory does. Yeah, and so it's merely because people don't want to be labeled in any way, but
Mm-hmm.
typology is not meant to label you.
Right.
It's kind of like you're already labeled. You're already labeled and you don't know it.
Right.
So
Yeah. Great point.
Yeah. If you know that certain way to put that term to put yourself as, then now you can grow beyond it because now you can identify it. And the first step to changing something is to identify it. And so that's why I love type. It helps you identify your
Yes.
traits.
So I
Yeah.
make that point all the time. So brilliant. Yes. And what do you think about this theory? My theory is people say they extrovert and they say, oh, I don't want to be put in the box. That's the common templated, like stamped answer. But what I really think it is that if you are to be typed, that comes along with some negatives about your type that you might have to address. And if you have
Mm-hmm.
to address it, now your ego is going to be in check. And for certain types, I believe that that is not something that they feel comfortable doing. That's why I feel like when I coach people, it's mostly it's been NF temperament. They're always kind of searching, looking inward. And other types may be like, well, I've always just worked hard, and that's been the solution to everything. So, do you think that theory might hold ground that people just don't want to evaluate the negatives?
Yeah. I feel like that working hard is kind of an excuse. It's like everything can be an addiction, and that includes working hard. Like
Hmm.
sometimes people can use that as a distraction from actually facing their problems because it can give you a sense of achievement in the moment, in the short term. And so it can make you ignore those big problems that you have when you do that. And so, what I would say is that yes, it's so important to get into type and to really understand and know yourself so that you can then improve from that. You kind of need a baseline self awareness in order to improve. And it hurts. Like healing necessitates pain.
Hmm.
So the moment you learn about type and you learn about the bad parts of your own personality type, there might be pain associated with that. But healing always requires pain.
Right.
So that is a good thing because then once you have that, there's a term called post-traumatic resilience or post-traumatic growth, and then you can grow after learning about those negative things and become a better person. There's a saying that people try so hard to look good, or to look better that they don't try to be better. So it's almost like people are concerned with how they appear rather than like appearing good rather than being good.
Right.
And so they don't want to learn all of these things about themselves because they're not truly interested in growing themselves. So sometimes it's kind of like they just want to maintain face. Yeah.
Do you think that attitude is type specific?
I think that different types have different ways of going about that. It's like a human general phenomenon.
Okay.
Yeah, they call it fixed mindset and growth mindset too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Joyce, I really appreciate you spending some time with me. Really excited to just get this interview out there and kind of expose my audience to what you're all about, and appreciate your time today.
Yeah, it was great being interviewed by you. This is a great project you're embarking on, interviewing these typology people. Yeah.
Cool.